hi everybody, my name is Ashley, and I am going to be talking about insurance. But I'm not going to talk about what products are out there and the policy wording. Instead, I thought it would be better to just share some real stories with you that affect our customers and the role that insurance has played in helping them deal with these situations. So very quick introduction to me. I have been working in insurance for the past 14 years. I really love insurance. I've spent the past 5 years in business insurance and the past 3 building with Jack. So we mostly help freelancers, but about 30% of my customer base is small businesses, but they all have one thing in common. They're creative, they're designers, they're photographers, they're developers, they build, they make, they create stuff for clients. But what I think makes With Jack unique is that not only do I have over a decade of experience in insurance, I've also spent 7 years working as a freelancer. I was a freelance photographer, mostly weddings, but I also did some commercial work too. So I think that this gives me a unique perspective, having been on both sides of the fence, and hopefully gives me the opportunity to bridge the gap between insurance and creative. So there are tons of different insurance products out there. We've got professional indemnity, public liability, employer's liability, directors and officers insurance, legal expenses, business interruption, and loads of other things too. And that can be incredibly overwhelming. I'm only going to focus on the products that I believe are relevant to the type of work that you do. And I really like to simplify insurance by thinking of it as a product that helps to keep you in business by supporting you financially and legally if you have problems with a client or you make mistakes in your work. So it's really that simple. It's a product designed to help keep you in business. So I'm going to share 3 stories. With all of the claims that we have dealt with, they all have some common factors, okay? First of all, most of them are as a result of a client relationship breaking down. So it's not actually that the person doing the work has done anything wrong. That's actually very rarely the case. Most of the time, it's just that these cracks start to appear in the relationship and it goes downhill. And that usually is as a result of a client misunderstanding what work they can expect or when they can expect to receive it. But more often than not, it's just because you've got a bit of a bad apple client. Most of the claims that we help with have actually had contracts involved. So I spend lots of time on the freelance and small business subreddits, even though I've been banned from there. And all of these people go on there asking, do I need insurance? What kind of insurance do I need? And so many people reply and say, no, you don't need insurance. As long as you have a contract that says, I'm not liable for anything that goes wrong, then you'll be safe. That is terrible advice. Don't listen to those people. A contract is great for laying the foundation of what duties are to be expected of each party, but insurance would step into action if those duties ever come into question, which, trust me, sometimes they do. And a contract also doesn't stop a client from saying that they're unhappy with the work that you've done. And it certainly doesn't pay your legal fees if something does happen. Okay, let's get into these stories. Story number 1, Mr. Bully. So I have a customer who's a developer, and he's very good at what he does. He knows his stuff. And he was hired by Mr. Bully to build an extension for a browser. So he followed his usual workflow procedures, talking to the client, figuring out what they wanted this to do. They drew up all of the features, and he created this spec of work. So he went off and built it. And when he came to demo it to the client, Mr. Bully said, I like it, but it doesn't do this thing that I want it to do, and it also doesn't do this other thing that I want it to do. And the developer said, well, that's fine, but those features weren't actually included in the original spec, so I can build those things, but it's going to cost you extra money. Now, we see this happen a lot, I think, in all of our jobs. Scope creep. Is anybody familiar with that? Yeah, where a client starts to change the brief as the project is underway, and they start to add more features into it, and in some cases expect the work to be done for free. And I think a lot of people would actually do the work for free because they think, well, I don't want to ruin this relationship that I have with my client, and maybe they'll hire me for more work, or maybe they'll recommend me to one of their friends. But fortunately, my customer, the developer, didn't say that because it's not good practice to do work for free. So when he said to Mr. Bully, yeah, I can build that, but it's going to cost extra, a reasonable client would have said, that's fine, let's reassess the budget. But Mr. Bully, as you can guess from his name, was not a reasonable client. And he said to the developer, well, I feel like you're trying to take advantage of me here. So I'm not going to pay you for the work that you've already done, which, by the way, totaled £9,000, a lot of money. And if you don't cooperate with me, and if you don't cooperate, then I am going to take things further. So fortunately, the developer had professional indemnity insurance. And that one slight threat there, if you don't cooperate with me, I am going to take things further, that triggered his professional indemnity policy. If you have professional indemnity, this gives you access to a team of legal experts. And in this case, the developer was given 2 lawyers to help him negotiate with his client, okay? Because we wanted to get him paid. And not just that, but we wanted to reach a reasonable conclusion with these extra features that Mr. Bully wanted. Now, unfortunately, again, as you can tell by Mr. Bully's name, he really dug his heels into the ground and he refused to pay this invoice. So the professional indemnity policy has a mitigation costs clause, and what that meant was that the insurer paid the developer the £9,000 that he was owed by his client, and then the lawyers negotiated with Mr. Bully to make him disappear into the sunset. So yeah, so scope creep, a lot of us are familiar with it, a client wanting some work for free, then refusing to pay the invoice when the developer didn't cooperate, but fortunately his insurance provided him with legal experts to help him in that situation, and they made sure that he wasn't out of pocket for the work that he'd already done. I've tried to choose a story that's a little bit different in the sense that the last story, it certainly wasn't the fault of the developer. Okay, it was just an unreasonable client. But in this one, it actually was the fault of the people doing the work. Story number 2, the wheels have fallen off. So I have a customer, they're a small studio, and they do design, branding, development, marketing. And they were hired to create a website for a client. And there was a lot of buzz around this website. It had a launch date, and the client had hired a PR firm to drum up buzz for the launch. But unfortunately, it was one of those projects that as soon as it started, things just started to go wrong. I'm not sure of the specifics, but as we all know, things can get in the way, life can get in the way. Somebody can call in sick and the work doesn't get done, and before we know it, this project was delayed. In the studio's own words, they said, we have overpromised and underdelivered. And when they realized that this project was going to be delivered late, or that they could ship something on time, but it wasn't going to have all of the functionality that the client had expected and paid for, they obviously had to have this very difficult conversation with their client. Unfortunately, that conversation didn't really go well. And very similar story. The client refused to pay them for the work that they'd already done. In this case, that was £27,000 worth of work. And not just that, But they said, well, hold on a second. Now that our website isn't going to be launched when we expected it, and we're going to launch maybe 4 or 5 weeks down the line, that's almost a month. That's over a month of lost business. So we're going to claim that loss of business from you. And because we've spent a fortune on hiring a PR firm to drum up buzz for this launch that isn't going to happen because of you, we expect you to reimburse those costs. So you can see how one little thing, getting hired to build a website that doesn't get shipped on time, can grow arms and legs. So I know a lot of people think, well, I'm a wedding photographer and I only get paid £1,500 to shoot a wedding, so there's not too much at stake, but there's a lot more that a client can claim back from you. So yet again, the studio had professional indemnity insurance. It provided them with legal experts to help negotiate with the client. In this case, we acknowledged that they were at fault. They weren't going to deliver the project on time, so we weren't expecting all of the invoice to be paid, but we did expect some of it to be paid, and then the insurer would have paid them the rest so that they weren't out of pocket. But the clients, yet again, dug their heels in. We're not paying this invoice. So the insurer paid the studio the £27,000, provided the legal experts that the studio had to help them could get it in writing that the client wouldn't take things further. So let's talk about a different product, because 2 of those stories were about professional indemnity insurance. Most of our claims are for professional indemnity insurance, and they tend to be really big claims. The average claim is £17,000. So this one's a bit different. So we've talked about clients not paying because they're unhappy with the work that you've done or the time scale that you've delivered it. What happens if a client just doesn't pay you because they don't have the money to, or because they're being difficult? Has anybody ever had any trouble getting paid off a client? Yeah, about half the room. Yeah, that sounds about right. And did you know that there's an insurance product to help you? Okay, so story number 3, we have cash flow issues. We've just launched this product, so I don't have too many stories about this. But we have a couple of developers. I know all my stories are about designers or developers, but they make up the majority of my customer base. However, these stories are applicable to any industry where you're providing a service to a client. So we have 2 developers hired to build a website for a skate park. Where you could log on, you could book a time slot to go and do your ollies and your kick flips. I used to play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. I know all the tricks. This skate park was funded. I'm not sure if it was, invested by VCs, or I think it was government backed. But at some point, the funding fell through. So this client had to come to my customers, the developers, and say, we don't have any money to pay you. And by this point, they'd done £11,000 worth of work. Now, there's this insurance product. It has a terrible name, okay? It's called legal expenses. And that doesn't really describe what it does. And not just that, but insurers actually market it as employment tribunal insurance. But buried deep within the policy wording are all of these relevant features for people like you. In fact, make a note to ask Ashley about relevant features in a legal expenses product during the Q&A later. Write that down. So, buried deep within the legal expenses policy wording is a contract and debt recovery clause. And what this means is that if you have this product, an expert lawyer will formally chase your debt for you and incite court proceedings if they have to, but we've not seen that happen yet, because there's just a lot more legitimacy when you have a legal entity pursuing a payment that a client hasn't made than following your usual credit control procedures, maybe sending a few reminders, maybe even adding a late payment fee. There's that fear factor when a legal entity sends you a letter to say our client is owed this money, so you better pay it. So yes, that's a legal expenses product. So if you're one of the lucky people who never has to make a claim in their insurance, then statistically you won't make a claim. Okay, only 7% of our customers have ever had to use their insurance. It doesn't mean that it's a waste of money, because being insured gives you the confidence to say no to scope creep when you have a Mr. Bully. Or being insured gives you the confidence to stand up to clients who are trying to get more out of you. And that, in my opinion, is priceless. That was absolutely worth the £25 a month I was paying at that point. So on that note, everybody should check out With Jack. So you can find me online on Twitter at I am Ashley. I'm happy to talk about photography, video games, or insurance. Or you can check out what I'm building at With Jack. And also, if anybody has any other questions, we're doing a Q&A, so you can ask them there. So thank you for listening.